What's up, mi gente? Welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about aftermarket Glock frames for airsoft purposes, of course, for YouTube. Before we get into that, I want to just say thank you for all the support. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe. Share with a friend. I'm trying to build up the channel, and I appreciate you guys. And hit that notification so you get notified of new videos. All right, let's get into it. So aftermarket Glock frames are very popular. There's a few out there. It helps, if you want to build a Glock and keep the price down, because OEM frames are probably double. OEM Glock frame is going to be about $300 or more dollars when you're talking about aftermarket frames. Some of them are even in the $50 range. But with that said, there is a few companies, and one thing I will start off with is anytime you're doing aftermarket, things are going to be an issue. You have to tweak, kind of, change things. OEM is always the best way to go. Now, granted, I have 3 aftermarket builds, and I've kind of tweaked them out, so I want to talk to you guys about that. But anyway, let me just move this table back. But as we get into it, there is a few companies out there. There's Lone Wolf, as you see here, and that's what we're going to be talking about today because I have the most experience with them. There's SET Manufacturing, Grey Ghost Precision makes them, P80. Now, P80 is an unserialized frame. In my state, that's illegal. You have to have a serialized frame because that is the firearm part. That's where you get your FFL. You have to have a permit, all that. So check your local laws. If P80s are legal in your state, those are great frames. I've never had experience with them as they're illegal in my state. But I have experience with SET Manufacturing. My suggestion to you is stay away from those. I've had battery issues, reset issues. A buddy of mine has tons of issues with his as well. I know they're well priced, but Now, I'll talk about why I like Lone Wolf, and right off the bat is, one, their customer service is awesome. Now, I have no affiliation with them. I just use them. I use my own money for this, but their customer service is great. Their armors are a lot of knowledge. You could speak to them. They kind of help you out, and I've had hours with their armors, so that's how I know. And the main thing is they keep the Glock profile, meaning any holster you have, you could use. With SET, all these other ones, you have to use specific holsters, and I don't want to get into that. I have so many holsters like Safariland, US Duty Gear, etc. So I like that about Lone Wolf. So when you get your Lone Wolf frame, it comes in a box just like this. You're going to get your frame. Now, doesn't come like this because this is aftermarket trigger shoe, etc. But you could get it complete. It's going to have like a Glock polymer trigger in there, etc. But just know they're using their internals. It's not OEM Glock internal parts. This is why I get stripped frames from them. A stripped frame from them is about $80. Yep, $80. A complete frame from them is about $150. They make a compact frame, which is a shorter grip, like for your G19s, G23s, etc. They make a full-size frame, like you see here, which is like a Glock 17 frame, right? We'll just go with that, but you can use a Glock 34, a Glock 45, etc. Now, I mentioned Glock 45, and you're going to say, So when you go on Lone Wolf site, they're going to say that you could only use a Gen 1 through 4 slide. You can use a Gen 5 slide. I've dealt with the armors. They'll give you the info if you talk to them, but they really will suggest you use a Gen 1 through 4 slide, but you could use a Gen 5 slide, and I'll talk about that in the video on what you need for that. But anyway, that's the way their frames come, right? Textured. When you get their frame, you get the complete frame. You get a magwell because their magwells are their own. You can't use any aftermarket magwell with their frames. That's one of the cons, I guess, but it is what it is. They use a polymer magwell. It just has a little pin. You pull that out, and if you want to, take it off, you just slide it off. They give you 2 back straps. You get a flat back strap, like the one I already have installed, and you get a little more rounded back strap here that just has a little more, angle to it. I like the straight angle for my grip angle. And you get a dust cover right here. This little guy right here, little U-shape that goes in the front of the frame. That's for if you're using a Gen 1, 2, 3 slide, you use the dust cover so there's not that too much space and it looks wonky. If you're using a Gen 4 or Gen 5 slide, you take that dust cover off because of the way the slide is with that, right here. So you don't need, if you keep the dust cover in, you won't be able to put the slide on. So you just take a little something thin and just pop it out. It just pops right out. So that's how the frame is going to come from Lone Wolf. Again, I suggest getting it stripped and using Glock OEM internals. Why? Because when I've had issues with reset, sometimes some battery issues, it's been the one time I got a complete frame from them. They make their own internals. I suggest using OEM parts. Get a strip frame, use OEM parts. It's the best way. Now, same with an aftermarket slide. That's going to be hit or miss. Sometimes you get a slide that's no issues, and I'll talk about that. And sometimes slide companies have different tolerances. You might have issues on the rail with it going into battery, getting hung up, etc. All right, and I'll talk about all this more as I go in the video. I'm just kind of telling you what you get from Lone Wolf. Everything comes in a box, nice, good to go. So right here, as you see, I have a Gen 3 Glock 17 Safari Precision slide. It is an aftermarket slide, but I had no issues. It went right on. I've had the most rounds through this guy, and never an issue. Went right on. You don't have to change anything. You could put a Gen 1 through 3 slide right on it. Everything worked great with this guy. Now, a little change you do have to make if you're using a Gen 4 slide. If you're using a Gen 4 slide, then when you have your frame, what you need to change is you need to change the trigger housing block to a Gen 4 housing block. The mag release or mag catch has to be a Gen 4 as well. And you have to take that dust cover off. Those are the three things you have to change to if you're using a Gen 4 slide. If you're using a Gen 1 through 3 slide, you don't have to change anything. You're good to go. You can use all Gen 3 parts and be golden. Like in this build right here, it's all Gen 3 stuff. Good to go. Now, I did mention that you could use a Gen 5 slide. And as you see here, this is my Gen 34 Gen 5 slide on the Lone Wolf frame. This is where it gets a little interesting, where you have to change more parts. And this is kind of where I learned the ins and outs of the Lone Wolf frame, because I spent hours with the armors on the phone. So before I was going to use this OEM Gen 5 slide, I wasn't going to use a Gen 5 slide at all because they didn't suggest it. So I went out, I wanted another Glock 34. I went out and purchased a Rival Arms Gen 4 slide to work with this frame. Now, because my Gen 5 wasn't sliding on, I couldn't even get it to slide on, and this is when I started learning more. So I ordered the frame from Rival Arms. Nice frame, had awesome cuts. It was like a combat cut. Like the aesthetics, but the tolerances were way off. I couldn't even get the slide on to even get into battery. It was just a mess. And as in talking with the armorers over at Lone Wolf, they said, OEM slides are going to probably be the best if you're using aftermarket. All tolerances are different, etc. And that's when I said, well, I have an OEM Gen 5 slide. And he said, you can use it, but you have to change some things out. And let's talk about it. So again, this is a Gen 5 slide on this Lone Wolf frame, guys. So what needs to change if you're using a Gen 5 slide is you still have to change the locking block, right? I mean, the trigger housing block, that has to be a Gen 4, just like if you're using a Gen 4 slide. Still have to use a Gen 4 mag catch, have to remove the dust cover, but the locking block is different, and this is where you have to change some things on your slide on a Gen 5. If you want to use a Gen 5 slide on a Lone Wolf frame, you must use a Gen 1 through 4 barrel and a Gen 1 through 3 recoil spring. This is a Gen 5 barrel and a Gen 5 recoil spring. They went to that double kind of spring system. This will not work. I think it's just because of the size, gets hung up. And what's different between a Gen 1 through 4 barrel and a Gen 5 barrel is the lugs. The locking lugs, they changed it on a Gen 5. So that Gen 5 will not lock into your locking block. Now, if you're like me, you think, well, I'll just put a Gen 5 locking block in there. That's kind of what I thought No, because a Gen 5 locking block is a single pin system, right? In Gen 5 they changed it to a single pin, and the frame from Lone Wolf has the dual pin for your Gen 1, 2, 3 locking blocks. So for you to use a Gen 5 slide, remember you have to get a Gen 1 through 4 barrel. There's a Gen 4 barrel in there, and you need a Gen 1 through 3 style recoil spring. You know, it's going to have the little spring cup here on the end to be installed into the barrel, and that's the combination you have to choose. And you can use a Gen 5. You have to use a Gen 5 backing plate as well, but that'll be on your slide, and then it'll slide right on, no issues. Super sorry, didn't put it in right. That's the other thing too. Sometimes you have to just make sure with these that you are going completely on the rails. So when you're going, like if you, there you go. Oh. See what I mean? These could be finicky if you don't get them, line them right up. Now, one thing on that finicky, since it just happened, I'll talk to you about that. And this one has no issues because I've had it on for a while, and maybe it's my spring that's a little off. Make sure I have everything on. They do, and they'll tell you this from Lone Wolf, if you have any issues with your slide kind of hanging up, it could be the frame itself. You might need to polish these rails a little bit. Take the slide with no internals in it, and just go back and forth, slide it back, and see if you see any hot spot, like any raised parts or any parts that are getting hung up. Like right now, I'm pretty sure I'm getting hung up on the slide lock. So just make sure there is no issues with you know why I wasn't going on, guys, and that's I didn't even look. I put the Gen 5 barrel in, so it wasn't locking up. So see, you're gonna have that issue right there. So has to be a Gen 1 through 4 barrel. That was my bad. And the Gen 3. Glad it happened because you could see exactly what happens. I was kind of wondering, like, what's going on? So, but what I was talking about is you could put that slide, kind of go back and forth. Just go nice and slow and see if you have any raised spots. If you have any raised spots in that frame and you feel any hangups, it may cause not going into battery issues. You might not get reset. So you may need to polish just the frame rails there, you know, kind of mark it as you go really slow. See if you feel a little bump, a little edge. Just go with some light sandpaper, a little Dremel, very easy, not taking too much, and polish them out to get. But this slide works fine, but obviously not with a Gen 5 barrel because the lugs here are different. That's what they changed on the Gen 5 on the barrel. The lugs are different, so they're not going to line up with the locking block. But if you use it, you can use a Gen 5 Glock 34 slide on their full-size frames. They'll tell you all the slides that you could use on their frames right on their website, like a 17 long slide you could use, 17, 45, etc. But if you're going to use the 45, that's why I mentioned it's a Gen 5. That's where you're going to have to change. You're going to have to change your barrel to a Gen 1, 2, 3, 1 through 4, and cannot use the OEM recoil spring from Glock this style. You can use an OEM recoil spring like Gen 1, 2, 3. I believe Gen 4 is the same, the dual spring. If I'm wrong about that, then you could use a Gen 4 recoil spring. I think they went to this recoil spring in Gen 4 too. Can't remember. I kind of don't have many Gen 4s. I have mainly, Gen 3s and then, Gen 5s. But that's it for me. I think Lone Wolf is one of the best frames to get. They feel really good in the hand. They're well made. The polymer isn't flimsy. You could Dremel them because I've done double undercuts to them, so it's good polymer to work with. It's to stipple. I've stippled them. You can. I run Talon grips, but you could stipple them. So they're good frames. But my suggestion is use OEM Glock internals. It's the best way to go. Same with your internals on the slide. If I've used aftermarket firing pins, I've got light strikes. OEM is the best way to go. There's a lot of companies that tout titanium firing pins, but I've had most issues with all that aftermarket stuff. But if you want to use an aftermarket frame, by all means, go ahead, just research the company you're going to use. I'm not saying absolutely use Lone Wolf, but Lone Wolf is good. They got it pretty much down pat. I haven't had any major issues once I've got the right combination of parts that you need. So just know that if you're going to use simply a Gen 1, 2, 3 slide, you're going to be good. You're going to have the least amount of issues. No problem there. If you're going to use a Gen 4 slide, you're also good. Just need to change, and they say directly on their website exactly what parts you need to change. Trigger housing block, mag catch, and you remove the dust cover, and you're good to go. Using a Gen 5 slide, you must change out the barrel and recoil spring to a Gen 1 through 4. That's it, guys. If you have any questions on this, hit me up. It did take a lot of, rights and wrongs, trying different things, and and spending some money. So I kind of have it down pat. That's why I wanted to share it with you guys. This gun is newer. I probably have about 500 rounds through it. It's been running great, no issues. But once I got the right combo down, I was good. I was good to go. It's funny too. I have a SlideWorks Gen 5 slide that works awesome on my OEM frame. Really nice slide. And I wanted to try it on the Lone Wolf frame just to try it, and I was still having some cycling issues. I think, and I don't think, I've just been doing it most. I got lucky with the Safari Precision slides. I would say if you can use an OEM slide, I think you're going to have the least amount of issues. But again, if you're doing a custom build, by all means, go for it. But just, put that slide on there. Really go back and forth. Make sure there's no raised parts. And if you have any issues, call Lone Wolf up. They have a great armor over there. I believe his name is Dylan. He'll give you tons of info. They'll email you schematics if you need and all that. Great company to deal with. But again, it's aftermarket parts. Like anything aftermarket, trial and error. You have to change a few things, do a few things. They do like to run wet. That's one thing too. When you're building these, lube them up, because some guys, I'm having issues, and all it is a lube. A lot of times when your slide isn't going into battery, or you're having sometimes reset issues, it could just be a simple hang up, could just be dirtiness, buildup. It's not lubricated enough on the frame rails, or it just needs a slight polish on the for a hot spot, like a high spot and all that. So that's pretty much it, guys. Again, the only cons for me are the magwell, that you have to use their magwell. It's not a bad magwell, but it's not too flared. It's kind of weird looking, but again, it does feel good in my hand. But I would like to use an aftermarket magwell. You can't. That's pretty much really the only real con I found. I thought the con was gonna be, hey, you can't use Gen 5 slides, but you can. So that's not a con, and that they don't make a slim frame, because I do have some extra parts for a Glock 48. So what I did with that is I ordered an OEM frame for that one, because the only company I know that makes a slim frame is SCT, and I suggest you guys stay away from SCT. But that's it, guys. If you have any question on Lone Wolf builds, hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you guys are using. If you're using an aftermarket frame. For anybody who's running like a Grey Ghost, let me know how that is. I have no experience with them, but I heard they're pretty decent as well. And that's it, guys. Check out Lone Wolf if you're looking to build a airsoft Glock. And I will see you on the next one. Dale.